Tuatahi ka mihi atu ki a koutou e te tuakana e raureti I roto I tēnei whare he wāhi hou mō koutou no reira kia tau ngā manaakitanga ki runga ki a koutou. Kia anga whakamua I roto I te whakaaro kotahi. Thanks for the opportunity and when I was contacted by Honiana Love to consider all of the elements. Of course, that was quite a full conversation, as you can imagine. The move of Ngā Taonga into the National Library building, and of course, having been a part of things through Te Ropu Whakahau for all those years in libraries, and my wife Hinarangi's work in archives, and then working with Cliff Whiting so closely on the design aspects of he tohu. I was very pleased and excited to be invited to think about a stone to symbolise this new facet of the collections and the work of Ngā Taonga, which I completely support. The repurposing of information from a previous time to make people's lives now even more rich and full is an important piece of work that Ngā Taonga has at the heart of its vision. So vision is one of the things that Honiana spoke to me about. Of course, sound and vision. And with the tohu, the brand of Ngā Taonga, the idea of the eye and the collection within a whakahuia, the idea of the spiral like a takarangi, those all began to speak to me as well as, looking at language, like for instance, one of the interpretations of the word for eye in Māori is mata or kōwhatu, which kōwhatu relates of course to kōhatu and stone, mata about vision, and then with the idea of collecting within the idea of your eye begins to collect memories, then a lot of those ideas become important. So how do you embody all of those concepts? And so Honiana and I spoke about the whakahuia as a concept, as a metaphor, and to look at that shape and also the concept of collecting a number of different things into one place for the benefit of people. And so the idea of a kōwhatu or kōhatu came about. And it really struck me thinking about language, that's how I approach a lot of my work, is unpack some of the words. And so one of the descriptions of stone in Māori, kōwhatu, and is a smaller stone. A larger stone is a kāmaka, and of course that's where there are some biblical references to Peter the Rock, he kāmaka. And so I started to look at the word kāmaka and how similar it is to kāmata. And kāmata is the very tip of the leaf. And so I thought, well, the collections in Ngā Taonga are like all the different film and sound recordings are like a whole bunch of tips of leaves, little bits, snippets of people's perspectives. It's not the whole tree, it's not the whole person, it's a little part of what they have to offer at that particular time, the tip of the leaf, not PG tips. And then I thought, one of the things about the kōwhatu in our pūrākau, ngā kete o te wānanga, is the two stones, te whatu kura, which was two stones, te whakaatai and te rehutai. And of course, te whakaatai is a white stone, and te rehutai is a red stone. So red is a colour of chiefly high status, so mana. So I thought, a good name, a conceptual name, a metaphorical name for all of those concepts, it encapsulates all those concepts, was Te Kāmata Kura. So kura in that sense isn't literally red or red ochre. It's an aspiration of improvement or of increase or progress. And kāmata, of course, is the tip of the leaf. So the red tinge to the tip of the leaf is that it's not an ordinary leaf. Leaves are green. But then you have that saying, mate atu he te kura, hara maira he te kura. Of course, te in that situation is figurative language for the chief or the head, the prow of the canoe. But it could also be like the red tinge to the punga, te kura. And so when the punga ceases to be vibrant and lush and green, it goes a reddish tinge. And that dies, falls to the side of the trunk and eventually falls to the ground and dies away, but nourishes the plant. And then the piko comes through and it's a beautiful green, and the life cycle continues. So, matatu he te kura, hara maira he te kura is in my mind like you collect the sound or the vision within a recording of a person, the tip of a person's life at that particular moment. And you record it and you collect it. And that is good for that person, I suppose, but later on, people may be able to find some kind of new purpose for that information, a new value, a new information to help progress. And that's what I was looking to embody in this simple rock, which originates from the west coast of Te Wharetapu o Ngā Puhi Nui Tonu, from around the base of Maunganui. Two mountains in my home. My home is Opānaki, which is a little segment of what is now known as Kohu, or Te Kohu na Ihinga. And our two mountains, of course, are Maunganui, e tū ki Ripiro, and Maunganui, which stands on the west coast above the beach of Ripiro. And Maunganui looks inland to Tutamoe. Tutamoe ka tū ki uta, ki tuawhenua, ko Maunganui ki tai, ki Ripiro. And this rock comes from Maunganui. Of course, Te Wharetapu o Ngā Puhi Nui Tonu recognises Tutamoe and Maunganui as some of the rocks of the southern western border. But of course, Kaipara and Ngāti Whātua recognise that Tutamoe and Maunganui are part of the northwestern border of Te Rohe Pōtai o Mahu ki te rangi. So there's lots of significance in perspective, identities, relationships, in those two places. Of course, the power of the West Coast, te mona tā pukupuku o Tāwhaki. Embodied in that is also the understanding, and I spoke about te kete o te wānanga, o ngā kete o te wānanga, tāne te wānanga nui arangi. But we're also on the West Coast, as other iwi have the perspective of Tāwhaki, whereas tāne is our pre-human ancestor. We can also trace our direct lineage to Tāwhaki, even though Tāwhaki was from Hawaii. We understand that whereas tāne was our pre-human ancestor, our atua ancestor, Tāwhaki was part human and part atua. So he was closer to us and endured some trials in order to receive the information and wisdom and mātauranga of ngā kete o te wānanga. So that's embodied in this as well, which is crucial to any information, understanding that the embodiment of ngā kete o te wānanga is actually what helps to define significant information. And of course that's embodied in the simple rock. So like you say, simple words, but the depth that goes in 3 dimensions in this rock has been a great honour for me to come and speak about. Of course, people are going to see this and they're going to see a simple rock with a piece of wood, and as I said this morning, kauri timber from the Kohu Valley, so that's part of our mana, but the kauri isn't just a tree. The kauri was recognised as a chieftain amongst the trees of the bush, because not because only it grows to a quite great stature, but also one of the things that we understand in Waipoua in particular is that the kauri has the ability to manaki, and it doesn't look only for its own growth. It looks at the growth of all of the biodiversity that live within its domain, I suppose. And we know that in the crown of Tāne Mahuta, for instance, in Waipoua, there are over 400 different species that live in the crown of the tree. So in that respect, Tāne, the tree, is the caretaker, the chief of a whole village in its branches and within its care. Of course, we have that saying of at home that the kauri tree has a brother that lives in the sea, and that is the parawa, or the sperm whale. Some people have the kōrero that it's all whales that are the brother to the kauri, but for us it's only the sperm whale. The other whales are all children of tangaroa, but the sperm whale is a child of Tāne, because the sperm whale and the kauri tree are brothers. And so the two brothers, of course, are together, symbolising the takarangi. The takarangi is a great device that our ancestors created, the difference between light and dark. Te mea taka mai te rangi. Information in both the story of Tāne te wānanga nui a rangi and Tāwhaki is about the information that came from ngā toi o ngā rangi, te tihi o manono, I o matua kore, ngā kete o te wānanga. And of course the takarangi is an important design for the National Library, te puna mātauranga. So the takarangi in the centre is symbolic of the brand for Ngā Taonga, but also it resonates with the takarangi of National Library, seeing as you're now here, and also it is quite distinctively different, the same but different, if I can be that kind of contradiction. The connection with he tohu is undeniable, because the understanding of that description of he tohu, he whakapapa kōrero, he whenua kura, is completely in harmony with Ngā Taonga. And so in behind the takarangi, if you look very closely, you can see the red ochre, which is the aspiration of improvement and enrichment. That can come from people's little ideas, like those I'm sharing with you today. Hoinana.
I want to just talk a little bit about in terms of particularly the kōhatu itself. You said it came from the base of Mananu, Te Tai Tamatani. But you walk along the beach and you just see rocks. What was it about this one that caught your eye? What was it about this one that says, hey, it's me that you want?
That's a really good question. Actually, I had this very discussion sitting in the Bulldog hot pool at Ngāwha with a relative of mine just the other day. And, you know, I'm a creative person, and creative people tend to influence the people directly around them. So when my children were growing up, we would go places and we would look at the environment of the places that we'd visit. Most often we'd go to the places that we were from. Summertime, you go and you don't just go to the beach, you go to the beach to get mussels, and you go from the places that you know where the mussels are, or you go to get kina or pau. You go to those places because you know them. You don't just turn up. And if you do just turn up to a place that you don't know, then you go and ask the local people, are these all right to get? Is there? And of course, they don't let you into where all the best places are, because that's what local people do. They sustain the viability of their resource by caring for it. And you should acknowledge that by going to those people who are the Māori of those places. There is that talk about, our term Māori that we use today to describe us as people was actually an imposition by Pākehā people who wanted to obtain the resource of wai Māori, fresh water. And so they would go and ask the people who knew where the fresh water was. So that's how we got called Māori, people who are from a place who know where the best fresh water is. But actually we could also be called Māori as well, because when we are from a place, we can know where the best resources are and how to care for them. We know what the seasons are, what's happening in the habitat. We know how to collect things when they're at their best. We know how to conserve them when they're not at their best. It's Māori. And it's an important discussion, because as we move away from actually living on a day-to-day basis, we lose sight of the phase of the moon. We lose sight of the conditions of the seasons, because we have access to countdown, and we can go on the internet. We have a watch to tell us what time it is. We don't have to be that conscious of the environment. That's quite a concern, and young people like Greta Thunberg are reminding the world that you've lost touch with your environment. And so one of the things we have to offer the world is that being tangata whenua, not mana whenua, I disagree with that term, it's a modern political term, but being tangata whenua, we have to be in touch with what's happening in the seasons, what's happening with the habitat, what are the resources, what's happening with those resources. And so that's a communication, that's a conversation that you have with your environment. So it's not a conversation like you and I are having. But you have to open not just your ears to listen. You have to open your eyes, you have to open your nose, you have to have your touch be able to be open to receive information. Yeah, you have to be able to taste things. And most importantly, your heart needs to be open to be able to receive that communication. So when you say, how do things in the environment communicate to you? They communicate to you not through the words that we're using. And when you think about it, it's a very poor way of communicating orally. Verbally is a very poor communication. And we've become limited because we just use our ears. And I remember Uncle Māori Marsden when I was a brat, being at his feet, and how he used to turn the lights out. And that's because we wouldn't use our eyes, we'd just use our ears. And more importantly, he'd say to us, open your hearts to what I'm saying. And so then if you begin to go to places that you love, then you begin to allow those places to speak to you. And things start to speak to you, like the birds and the trees and the stones and the water. So when I go to Maunganui, there's mussels there, there's mullet there. My cousin caught a kingfish the other night and skited to everyone at church on Sunday. Look at the size of the kingfish. Of course those things are there, but we go there now and just be there. Sunset. And you see the glory of the setting sun. And you think, my ancestors looked at that. And my grandchildren's grandchildren will see this and know that this is their home. Then that starts to speak to you. And so you begin to recognise that beauty has a language. So that beauty sometimes is in natural formation, either unusual formation or completely regular formation. And you might be looking at a whole beach full of rocks, and one rock will stand out, and you don't know why, because it's talking to your heart. And you go and investigate it, and you turn it over and it stops talking to you. Or you go to another one and you think, no, nothing's talking to me. And then you sit down and you look at the sea and then you look back again and there's a rock that's right beside you that, wow, that's a beautiful shaped rock. That's almost perfect. Wow. And then you pick it up. Now, that's communication. Of course, it's just a rock. Until you do something to it, like you add your talent or you add the kaupapa that I've spoken to you about. And then it starts to take on a greater presence. And then when people begin to meet around it, and you meet for the first time and have the performance, I use that word cautiously. But, you know, when people meet, there has to be a performance of some sort. And if it's just a white noise kind of chatter, then that's of no consequence. But if you elevate that noise to something which is out of the everyday, use language which is elevated language, you use a tone which is elevated, you use poetry and creative language, metaphor, then all of a sudden you're creating a whole new dimension to a simple rock that spoke to you initially. And that's how things speak to you. Wood's the same. Any natural material, if you collect that material from your own identity, then you don't just go out and cut a tree, you go out and you communicate. You wait until that communication comes to you, invites you to say, I didn't see you before. And then when you know that you have to remove something, what do you do to replace it? Particularly when it's from your important place. So if we constantly just took from our environment, then that would end up in that special place being depleted. And yes, this rock's got a new home here and it's an honour, but actually we've removed an element from Maunganui and we've put it here, and yes, that's an honour, but it doesn't do anything to the loss back there, unless when it was identified as something of some beauty that communicated, you have that whakahirahira right at that moment. Of course, that's about keeping balance, and it's about connection and relationship and consideration.
Now, there's not a lot that needs to be added, I don't think. Unless there is a little more that you feel that you can share with respect to it.
There's a little more. I suppose if I was to conclude and to continue the theme of balance, from the perspective of learning that I've had the privilege of participating in, with people like Māori Marsden and my uncle Ramatito, and many others, Kingi Matutaira, Ihaka. What I would say is that Māori, and we've used that term a lot today, Māori is something which is significant and needs to be ignited with prayerful thought, with careful consideration, having the right people in the right place at the right time, saying the right thing for the right purpose. That is something that even the best logistical planner sometimes can't organise. And that's why Māori is considered so important for the wharenui, for instance, or whare whakairo. But Māori in that situation is hidden once that ignition has happened. And if we take that talk, and like what I've spoken about this morning, about the identification of people as the Māori and the keepers of Māori. They may wear a high-vis jacket and steel-cap boots, and but they may have the most important information about a particular resource or a particular location on behalf of a particular group of people. You can't tell. You certainly can't tell by the way they're dressed, or even perhaps by the words that they speak. It's hidden within them. So Māori in this respect is hidden, hidden within the team and the perspectives and the board and the procedures of Ngā Taonga. That's the objectives, I suppose, the aim, the vision, the mission, those kind of things. So what is this? In the teaching we have, the Māori is hidden, but there is always something on display that indicates to people that Māori has been considered and that the right procedures have been taken. And that, in our appreciation in Ngā Puhi Nui Tonu anyway, is the knowledge of manea, ihu manea or manea. And so that the manea is a stone which accompanies Māori. Māori is hidden from view, manea is in full view. It doesn't have the responsibility of holding the Māori. It has the responsibility of indicating that the Māori is well and taken care of in that place. But it's hidden because, as it can be affected by positivity, it can be affected by negativity. The manea is merely the signpost, the instruction manual, if you like, that Māori is considered important here and that it's taken place. So I would consider Te Kāmata Kura as a manea for the Māori, which actually resides in you and all of the people who make Ngā Taonga Sound Vision come alive for people, come alive, the voices and the visions of people in previous times, so that inspires people to use their talent and creativity to form new ideas and new knowledge and embody those words. Mā te atu he te kura, hala mai rā he te kura. Hoi nano e te tuakana. Ka nui ngā mihi ki a koutou, tēnei wāhi, tēnei kaupapa nui whakaharahira, e mihi atu ki a koutou. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga o ngā whenga, te wāhi ngaro ki a koutou, me ngā tū momo mahi, ngā tū momo kaupapa kei te haere mai. Nō reira, ka nui tēnā, nō reira huri noa tēnā koutou, kia ora hui mai nō rata.